All right, guys. Jolene, I don't really have a formal introduction here for you, so I'm just kind of rip it off the top of my head here. But guys, so excited here to have with us tonight, Jolene Winn, the porn addict's wife. I'm trying to even think back, man. I think I honestly just saw one of your videos one day on maybe it was on YouTube or on Instagram, but this is two plus years ago. I think the first time we connected. Yeah, it was actually our first interview. I was in Nashville, so it would have been April of 2022 when we first spoke. But she's been a guest on the show here a handful of times. I think we tackled the approach of pornography addiction from two different angles. Obviously, we help and serve the men here. That's who we have here tonight, and she works with the women. But I think one thing that we do see is we see so much of the world through a lot of the same frames and same perspectives. So was really blown away with our first conversation, brought her back on last year, had another incredible conversation. And as we always try to bring service to you guys outside of just the recovery side, we have her here tonight to maybe talk about the female's perspective, how this impacts the woman's mind, how it impacts the woman's heart, so that you guys know, more importantly, why you're doing this and how it's impacted your partner, how it's impacted your wives, and what you need to continue to do for those of you that are single and maybe moving into relationships in the future, what things you can prevent. Hopefully that's maybe some things you're going to share tonight. If not, I apologize for that. But guys, Jolene Winn, Jolene, the floor is yours. Really excited and honored to have you here tonight.
Thanks. I am super excited. I love this opportunity, and I will start with my story. And if you guys have any questions, obviously just type them in the chat or just unmute and you can ask. This is very informal, but I'll start with my story so you guys get to know me a little bit better. My name is Jolene, and I am a life coach for the wives of men who struggle with a pornography problem. And I've been doing that for the last, wow, almost 4 years. And I got into this because my husband was addicted to pornography. So we have been married for 15 years now. And when we had been married for about 5 or 6 years, my husband came to me and told me that he had secretly been addicted to pornography the entire time. And I had no idea. I didn't see any red flags. There was nothing like, oh, that makes sense. It was very out of the blue. And it was really my first, he was the first person that I'd ever known that had struggled with pornography. I knew what pornography was. I'd been exposed to it, for the first time in 7th grade. So it's not like I didn't know it existed, but I had never had a personal connection to it really. And our first conversation, he came to me and he was like, hey, I have something I want to talk to you about. I said, sure. And he's like, okay, so I have, I'm addicted to pornography. And he used the word addicted. And he said, and I'm handling this. I don't need help and I don't want to talk about it. And that's how that went. So over the next couple of years, he continued relapsing, but we didn't really talk about it. It was not something we had a great dialogue about. And every once in a while, I would just kind of vaguely be like, hey, are you okay? And he'd be like, sure, or no, or actually I've had a relapse. And it wasn't until we'd been married about 10 years, he actually started going to therapy for depression and mental health. And that's when he kind of figured out that there was a root, like there was some kind of driving cause for the pornography problem, which I know Frank talks about a lot. And I realized that I was dealing with how I was affected by it, which if you had asked me this at the time, I would have been like, oh no, I'm totally good. Like I've got this, power through, we can face things head on. I'm fine. But it wasn't until I actually started getting into mindset that I realized and was able to actually identify how I was being affected by his pornography problem and was actually willing to tackle that head on. And when I did, and when I learned how to do that, I realized that there were so many women who were struggling with this in their marriage, and they also didn't have those same tools. And so that's when I decided to certify as a life coach. And then I started my business, and that's what I do now, is I help the wives of men who struggle with a pornography problem. So that's what I do. And I have, my husband now is beyond his pornography problem and has been for several years. And I have just the utmost respect for each one of you here. I want you guys to know that you guys are already in the top tier of gentlemen because you are willing to face something and even admit that it's something that you don't want in your life, which most people, male, female, whatever the problem is, don't even want to admit that it's a problem. They're like, no, it's totally fine. I'm not overweight. Like, I'm good. I don't actually want to advance in my career anyway, let alone actually say something like as taboo as pornography. Oh, this is a problem that I'm having. So I don't want you guys to think that I'm here as what I have found is that most of the betrayal trauma community is very negative in their view toward men. It's very much like, screw him, like, you should leave him, what a douche, and I just don't prescribe to that at all. I love my husband, I still do. I have a lot of sympathy for someone who is struggling with something that is so much, again, just a symptom. It's always been very clear to me that this is just a symptom of something that's underlying. And so I just want you guys to know, like, I'm not here to, I don't think negatively of you guys, and I'm here just to help. So hopefully if you guys have any questions, you can feel comfortable asking me, and I'm an open book. So nothing is off the table. You can ask me whenever you want about, my husband and I and how we handled things and whatever comes up for you guys. I do have a few things that I wanted to touch on. Hopefully they're helpful. And number one, and I'm going to throw Frank under the bus a little bit. Okay. So number one is something I heard Frank say one time on one reel. And I was like, oh man, this is the one thing that I think I've ever heard you say that I disagree. Okay. So here it is. The number one issue that your ladies, whether you're currently, how many of you are currently in a relationship? Some of you, how many of you, if you're not, do you want to be in one day? Gentlemen on the bottom of my screen. There we go. Okay. So the number one problem that your ladies are going to have with this, who wants to take a guess as to what it is? If you think you know what it is, type it in or just unmute. What do you think is the number one problem that your ladies are going to have with this? With the pornography problem?
She feels betrayed.
Good one. That's definitely top three. Anyone else have a different guess?
Like I could never like emotionally connect when I was using in a relationship, like detachment.
Sure, totally. Anyone else?
Well, I think it's probably in line with betrayal, but you don't think I'm sexy or attractive or beautiful?
That's a very good one. Not good enough. That's definitely number two. I would say it's number two. Does anyone else have any other guess? This is not like scientific PS. This is just like based off my personal experience with all the women I'm coaching. So you can't go look this up and prove me wrong. Okay. It's just my opinion, but it's true. Okay. Here it is. The number one issue that they're going to have is distrust. And it kind of goes with the betrayal. Okay. The hardest thing about your pornography problem is going to be the dishonesty and the distrust. It's the hardest thing to move past. So the best thing that you can do in your relationship is be as honest and upfront as possible. That's it. And I know this is where I thought I was going to throw Frank under the bus, because on one reel I heard you say like, hey, if you're struggling with this, like, you don't, get a couple wins under your belt first, get your sea legs under you, start, making progress, and then tell your girlfriend or spouse or whoever it is that you're struggling with pornography. And I was like, I don't agree with that. If you are struggling with it, be honest about it, because it is much harder for her, like as hard as it is about the not good enough and the sexy and the betrayal and the disconnect, all of that is hard. What's even harder is feeling like you don't trust her. What she feels is, you don't trust me with this. You don't trust me enough to tell me that you're struggling, right? You don't trust me enough to let me in and be vulnerable and let me help you in any way or support you. That's how she takes it. Does this make sense? And I totally get, and I coach on this all the time. I tell my ladies, I'm like, look, this is the hardest thing ever. This is the equivalent of like what he is coming and telling you brings up all of his shame, all of his guilt, all of the things that he struggles the most with. And he's being very vulnerable anytime he comes and tells you that. So that is a very difficult thing to bring up. Right. And that's what you guys are going through. And it's difficult for my ladies to see that. We work on it, believe me. But the more honest you can be as early in the relationship as you want. Now, I'm not saying that on the first date with somebody, you have to be like, okay, well, this chick that I don't know, like said on some Zoom call that I'm supposed to tell you about my pornography problem. I'm not saying that. And I'm also not saying that you have to give every single detail, because most of the time that's not helpful. Even if she asks you a lot of questions, you can reserve the right to tell her what you you don't have to tell her all the details. She might want to know. That's something that is going to happen with a lot of women. They think that if they just knew more about it, they'd feel better. So they might be asking like, okay, what websites are you going to? How long are you doing it? How frequently is it? What type, like, who's your type? What's your, what is it that turns you on? And you don't have to answer all those questions. The reason that she's asking that, if she does, is because she thinks that if she knew more about it, if she just understood it more, then she would feel better. It's the logical fallacy that we have that we're just lacking information, and that if we just knew more, if we just had more information, we would feel better about whatever it is. But she probably isn't going to feel okay even if she knows more. In fact, especially if she knows more, if she's not capable of handling the emotions that come up with it. Does that make sense? So she's trying to make herself feel better in all the wrong ways. I totally get that, but she doesn't know that yet. What she thinks is, okay, if I know more details, I'll feel better about it. So that's why she wants to know more. Now, again, I'm not saying you have to tell her all the details, but the more honest you can be with her, the more comfortable she's going to feel in your relationship, the more trustworthy she's going to find you. Does this make sense?
No, this is great. Thank you. And I actually, if we can maybe stay on this here a little bit, I know you have more you kind of want to get into. Where I was going to have a lot more guys outside of the ones that are here tonight that are going to see this. So maybe some of these guys aren't going to be able to use this information, and that's a difficult part, Jolene. I'm not going to kind of debate you on that clip, but there's obviously tremendous context of where that was.
And I
shared,
totally
right?
knew why you were doing it.
Yeah.
Again.
But for the guy that is maybe watching, hearing this now for the first time and hasn't yet had that conversation, is there a way to approach the conversation and have it in a way where maybe she's not going to ask too many questions because maybe he's not prepared to answer those right away, and begin to kind of build that trust, maybe not even trust right out of the gate, but at least a level of understanding. Like how does a man first start that conversation? Because I know for me, like I just blurted it out, and I mean, it's a big part of my story. There was a computer, I ripped it apart, and it was kind of like, we're done and done. Relationship didn't last, so maybe that was a part of to why. But yeah, how do you kind of approach that conversation as a guy that's sharing it with his wife, with his girlfriend, with his partner for the first time?
It's a great question. I don't know. Okay. The truth is it's going to be a hard conversation. And there are probably some things that you can do to make it easier. But if you're trying to figure it out ahead of time as a way, like, okay, what's the right way to do it? How can I do this in a way that's not going to make her freak out? I don't know her enough to know that. But what I will offer are a few pieces of advice. Number one is just allow whatever her response to be okay. And it doesn't mean that that has to indicate how it's going to go for the rest of the relationship. She might get really angry. I don't know. She might break down and cry. That's what I did. Apparently, I don't actually even remember. But my husband tells me I cried myself to sleep that night, and I don't remember that. But I do remember feeling very shocked, like I just had the floor pulled out from under me. That's what it felt like for me. And I just very much was like a deer in headlights. So she might just be surprised. She might not she might not ask anything at all. She might act completely unaffected, right? I don't know what her emotional response will be, but whatever it is totally fine. Just create space for her that just allows her to react however she's going to react, and to not take that personally, which I know is super hard. She might rail and yell and call you all the worst names. She doesn't mean it. Especially when someone acts in anger, and maybe you guys know this because you've been working with Frank and he's amazing. Anger is always just a mask for pain. So anytime anybody reacts in anger, it's really a hurt that's underneath that they don't know how to feel. And it's easier to switch to anger than it is to actually feel hurt. So if she reacts in anger or distance or pushing you away, it's all because she's trying to handle all of the emotion that's coming up, which is going to be the betrayal and all of those not enough feelings and worthlessness and rejection and fear and all of that that's coming up. So she's just feeling a lot of emotions that she doesn't know how to process well. And that's okay. Neither do you. That's why you go watch porn, right? She just does other things like online shopping and overeating, right? That's what women do. So we all have the things and she just doesn't know how to respond well. And that's okay. You don't have to take it personally. It doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Doesn't mean she wants to leave. It just means she just got hit with a lot of emotion and she doesn't know how to handle it. Not a problem. The other piece of advice that I have often offered for men is that if you want to plan it ahead of time and say, okay, I'm going to have this conversation. If you want to make it easier for her, one thing that you can do is, and if this works for you, great. And if not, just dismiss this, is if you know she has like a best friend or a sister or someone that you feel comfortable telling, you don't even have to tell them what it is, but you can call the best friend or the sister and say, I'm about to tell her something that's really difficult. It has to do with us personally, and I'm not going to go into details, but I know that she might have a hard time with it. And I wondered if it would be okay. Like, I want to tell her that it's okay if she talks to you, right? You give her, and even in that moment when you tell your spouse, hey, I'm struggling with this. I've already talked to your sister a little bit. I told her that, I was going to be telling you something difficult because I want to make sure that you feel like you have someone else and that you're not all by yourself. Again, that is not from personal experience. That is not what I did. I shoved it down and I didn't talk to anybody about it for a decade. So that was not what I did, but it could be something that is more helpful for her so that she doesn't feel like she can't talk to anybody about it. Another thing that I would offer is to leave the door open for further communication. And what I mean by that is, my husband said, hey, this is my problem. I don't want to do anything about it. I'm not doing therapy, 12 steps, nothing. And I don't want to talk about it. So he closed the door. So what I would offer as something that would be better is to say, I know this is a lot. I want to support you. I know this could be hard. I know there's going to be a lot of stuff that comes up for you. I want to support you in any way I can. I want to continue having these conversations. And I know they're going to be hard and they might look ugly. And maybe we need to get a mediator, right? Maybe we need a couples therapist. Maybe you need someone personally to help you. That's what I do. You can send them my way. Okay. Like, be open, leave the door open for her to come back to the conversation, because that first initial conversation is not going to be the only one that you have. And if she feels like she can come back if the door is open, that's another way that she'll feel more comfortable and confident that this is something that you guys can handle together. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Can I ask you a question, Jolene?
Totally.
I hope this isn't too personal. I think knowing you, it's not going to be. But in your relationship with your husband, were you guys pretty close and connected? And did you have strong communication in other areas prior to this? Or was that kind of maybe an issue that you guys had? Because I would assume if you have great communication, great intimacy in a lot of areas, which probably is not going to happen with somebody struggling with porn, but how was the communication and intimacy between the two of you? And does this conversation oftentimes lead to that really growing between the two?
That's a great question. And it's not too personal. Here's the thing is my husband and I have incredible communication. Always have. And that was why it floored me so much. My husband and I are best friends, and that was what our relationship was built on. We met when I was 17 and we were freshmen in college, and we just started talking. It's always felt very comfortable, easy to talk. We talk about anything. And so this was completely not on my radar. And it was something that hurt a lot, that he felt like, I understood why he felt like he couldn't tell me because of all the stuff that it brings up, but it was also very hurtful because I was like, we talk about literally everything. We have great communication. And up until then, I would have said we had the perfect marriage. And I still say that, but it meant like, I really thought that, and I still do, but that's something that was never an issue. And also physical intimacy was not an issue. We always had a great sexual relationship. That was not something that we struggled with, even with like, we have 5 kids, like even during pregnancies and like losing weight and like all the things, it was never a problem. We had a great sexual relationship. Has it gotten better? Yes, but it was always great. So that was another thing that, I mean, obviously you guys know porn and sex are not related. So it was separate anyway, but I know that it can affect your sexual relationship, but it was not like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense because we're not talking. And, you know, so of course he doesn't feel comfortable telling me this because we don't communicate anyway. And I have seen that quite a bit with my ladies that I work with, is that a lot of them do struggle with communication just in general. And so this just kind of adds to it, but that was not the case for us personally.
Well, I think that's, I mean, the vast majority of marriages today struggle with
Sure.
communication. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's no surprise.
Yeah. Do any of you gentlemen have any questions or thoughts? Did you know all of this already? Everyone's like, this is old news.
I'll say that I have been pretty open with my wife. We've been married 6 years, and I was always pretty open with her from the get-go. Even back when I was struggling at my worst, and um, I almost treated her like my accountability partner for the longest time because I just didn't know any better.
Mhm.
And so that was just a disaster. But we are definitely fall in the category of like, I struggle to communicate with her. Like I am not a great communicator. And I think porn definitely plays a factor to that because I just lose the connection when like I look at it. And so like it's tough to be open and honest with her. And like I guess my question to you at this point would be, I guess at this point in our relationship, we've tried different things over the years, and so I don't know where to fall, like where it falls in like talking to her about it, because like at this point, like it really just doesn't happen that much anymore.
Mhm.
Um, and so I just like I don't even know like how to really even like talk to her about it at this point.
Are
Because
you,
like she knows about it, she's very well aware of it going on, but it's just something that like we don't really discuss that much. And
do you feel like that's working for you in your relationship to not talk about it very much?
no, I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
So you do want to change it because it's not
I
working.
mean, I don't really want to talk about that, but I'd like to our communication to get a lot better and to
Sure.
feel that intimacy with her.
For sure. So what do you feel like's in the way?
I don't know. I guess I mean, like besides the porn,
Sure. Like, what do you feel like is preventing you from having the communication that you want to have with her?
well, like when I look at porn, like I just feel like I can't be open with her because like
Why?
I'm I've done this thing like against her that like I know hurts her, even though she doesn't necessarily take it personal. But like I know it's like a bad thing in our relationship, in our marriage. And so like I just struggle with that concept.
Okay. So what I want to offer is that you can understand and know that it's bad and hurtful, and that's not something that you want in your marriage, but we don't have to make it worse by hiding it. Does that make sense? It's like, yeah, you know what? This is hurtful and I don't want it in my marriage, but it's here. So we can either just pretend like it's not and continue,
Yeah.
or we can address it and we can face it. And it's not going to be pretty and it's not going to be easy, but hiding it makes it worse. Hiding it actually just then creates more of that disconnect and that barrier to communication, which then just compounds over time, right? You guys know this. It's not like, hey, if I hide this now, then it's just like this one thing that just stays there. No, now we have like, well, I actually did it 6 months ago. So now it's going to be even more awkward to bring up because now it's like I hid it on purpose. And now it's been a year and I did it twice. And then it just like snowballs. And so rather than it just being this one thing, Now it's a huge thing. And now it's not just, hey, I did this once. Now it's, hey, I did this and then I hid it. And I didn't want to talk to you about it because I didn't want to hurt your feelings, which is a really nice thought that I'm sure all of you guys have had. Guess what? You're going to hurt her feelings. She signed up for it.
Yeah.
If she's still with you, she knows you're going to hurt her feelings. That's always the potential when you are in a relationship. When you are willing to be vulnerable with another person, you are saying in that relationship, I know you might hurt my feelings. I'm all in. Now, that might hit you in the face sometimes. Sometimes we're like, I didn't sign up for this. But that's just the part of us that's hurt and upset. We actually did. We signed up. Your wife signed up. She got married to you. She was like, okay, I'm in for better or worse. This is your worse. She already signed up for it. And I know it's this really nice thought that, hey, I don't want to hurt her, but who you actually don't want to hurt is yourself. Who you actually don't want to face is how you feel when you have to bring it up to her and see her cry. So your brain says, let's just avoid this. I think if we just pretend like it didn't happen, it'll be better. It's not better. You can see that it's not better. It's not creating the relationship that you want. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to jump in here real quick, Jolene, if it's okay. I don't want
Yeah.
to hijack the call because this is for you tonight, but I want to zoom a little bit further out with you, Ben, here a little bit. And something that you said really jumped out to me. And you said, I'm not a good communicator. As long as you continue to hold on to that identity and call yourself somebody that's not a good communicator, you will find things in your world and in your reality to confirm that you're not a good communicator, which would be not having the necessary conversation with your wife. So I think the biggest thing that's going to shift this for you is what's going on in between the 2 years, right? It's going to be the mindset to frame your identity. So maybe you're not the greatest communicator in the world, right? Maybe you're not Tony Robbins, but that doesn't mean you're a poor communicator. I've had conversations with you over the last 18 months. I know you know how to communicate with people. Are you a little bit more withheld and introverted? Potentially, yeah, but that's a part of you. That could be a strength in many, many areas, but that doesn't mean that you're a poor communicator. And like I said, as long as you hold on to that identity, you will find things in the real world to confirm that belief about you. So I think the first thing you have to do is change the way you see yourself about your inability to not be a strong communicator.
100%. And here's a thought that I want to offer is like, okay, maybe you're not the best communicator compared to a lot of people, but I bet you know exactly how to communicate with your wife. You've had a lot of practice at it. You've been married for 6 years. And maybe you're like, no, I don't know. I don't think I've figured that out yet. I don't think I figured out how to talk to my wife yet. I guarantee you know better how to talk to your wife than I do. Or to Frank, or Ryan, or Brett, or Mitchell. Like, none of us know her as well as you do. So of course you can communicate with her. And I think that Frank brought up such a good point. If you keep that identity of I'm not a good communicator, or if you keep thinking about your relationship in terms of we don't know how to communicate, we're not good at this, that's also what perpetuates. Or if you think she doesn't want to hear it, she doesn't want to listen, whatever the thoughts that you have about her, those ones that you choose to continue, also same thing. It's just going to perpetuate that disconnect. We're like, well, I'm trying, but she's not listening, or we're not good at it, or I'm not good at it. Then that's what's going to perpetuate in your relationship. And that's what creates the problem.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Do you think every woman can heal from this, or is it
Yes.
is this something that
100%. Yes. They just
Okay.
don't have the right tools.
Yeah, my girlfriend and we've talked about this. We actually have gotten quite good at communicating.
Right.
I never said, I mean, well, actually, she does a lot of talking, so she always talks. So it's kind of, as long as I've learned to listen instead of interrupt. But we actually have a conversation. You know, we got to the point now where we have a conversation pretty much every week after call with Frank.
Mhm.
So about what the call was going on, right? We still have issues. She will admit that she struggles with this. She's like, she feels very hurt. Yeah, obviously, right? She, you know, I think there's some stuff from her childhood about like her dad having four wives, and you know,
Yep.
her two ex-husbands cheating on her in the past, and so there's some of those things that I think have played into some of her feelings. But she's made comments to me like she's like, I just don't know how I'm going to heal from this, and so.
Well, she can come work with me and I'll teach her, because here's what's happening. And I'm glad you brought this up, because this is something I wanted to bring up, is that this is essentially a trigger for your lady. Okay. It's triggering, just like with your woman, right? All the crap, all of her childhood trauma, all of her distrust from her past relationship, all of her physical insecurities that she's had from when she was 11, that's what's coming up to the surface. This is just the trigger that's bringing it all up, which is why it's absolutely possible for her to heal from, because it's not created by what you're doing. You didn't create all of the stuff going on inside her. You didn't create the trauma. You didn't create the pain. You didn't create all of that. What's happening is it's just the spark that's bringing it all to the surface. So now we get to decide what to do with it, and we can look at it and process it and let it go. Most people just don't have those skills. No one's ever taught her how to process pain from her childhood and let it go in a healthy way. In fact, we're taught the opposite. We're taught like, shove it down, power through, just eat your feelings, distract, it'll all go away and it's fine. And then we choose socially acceptable distracting outlets like pornography or eating, right? And that's what we choose to do. And that's how we handle ourselves emotionally. But she hasn't been taught how to actually sit and process pain from the past. And so it's just resurfacing. That's all. So all she has to do is learn how to process it and let it go, which is an actual skill. And as soon as she does that, then all that emotional baggage goes away and it stops coming to the surface. So this is how I'm able to do this as a job and talk about everything that my husband has ever done. And it doesn't bring up all my stuff because I processed it and let it go. Did I have to process it and feel it and experience it? Yes. Did it bring up all of my physical insecurities? Yes. Did I feel like I wasn't good enough, sexy enough, desirable enough? 100%. But I processed that, and then I worked on recognizing the beliefs that I had and seeing them as beliefs, like, oh, I just believe I'm not good enough, and I'm finding evidence, just like Ben believing he's not a good communicator and finding evidence. This was just a piece of evidence that my brain was using. It's like, oh, I already believed that I wasn't good enough, and then my brain is just finding evidence for it in my husband's pornography problem, in the size of my jeans, in whether or not my kids get good grades, or I throw the Pinterest-worthy birthday party, or whatever it is. Your brain is just looking for evidence to confirm what you already believe about yourself. And so as long as she believes things about herself that are negative, she will always use this as evidence to continue to believe that, which just keeps creating all of that negative drama. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, no, I can understand a lot of what you're saying, and kind of from a personal, yeah, I understand the way she behaves and some of the stuff she does. And when I told her that you were going to be on Frank's podcast, she actually kind of got excited because she was wondering if Frank knew someone that worked with women. And so I sent her both of your podcasts on Frank's, which I've listened to 2 times each, by the way, just to try to understand more. But so I don't know if she's listened to them. She made a comment the other day that, well, I need to get back to those. So I'm not going to push it on her, right? She'll come to that. But she's made comments like she feels like she needs to talk to me. So hopefully, she'll we'll see what happens. But I'm not going to push her in any direction.
100%. Because if you push people in that direction, they're not going to do anything. It's basically, and I tell my ladies not to do this with their men either, because this is like what it is. It's like, if you took the thing that you feel the most insecure about as a woman, and your husband was like, hey, sweetheart, I know that you feel a little uncomfortable because you're overweight and you hate everything that you wear and it makes you just feel so ugly, but I found like the right program for you and I already signed you up and it's going to be great and exactly the thing that you need to lose that 30 pounds and then you're going to feel great about yourself. This is like, that's what that would be like. So I love, you're doing exactly right, Ryan. It's like, okay, we're just going to offer it and then we're just going to let it go. You can't force her to do it. When she's ready, she will totally listen. And if I'm the right coach for her, I would love it. And if she doesn't resonate with me, I have other people that I can let you know exist. And maybe she'll resonate with them. 100%.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. Anyone else? My single gentleman, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I don't exactly have any questions. It's really helpful to hear this, and I've just been kind of thinking about I was kind of more or less forced. I was more or less forced to kind of confront this because I wound up in the hospital a few times when I was 20 from self-harm related to, skipping the birthday parties and the bars to go home and watch porn. And it was so depressing that I almost did some really dangerous stuff. So I've had the good fortune of understanding the importance of talking about it before I had any adult long-term relationships. But I was surprised at the different reactions I've gotten because
Sure.
I never hid this for years from anyone. But I've had some girlfriends who were like, I mean, they didn't love it, but they were cool with it and they were supportive. I had one girlfriend who, if I showed up and I was disconnected and in a bad mood, she would be like comforting. She's like, "Did it happen again?" I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "It's okay."
Mhm.
And then I've had other people who like, it was so incredibly hard to be honest because every time it was like a 2-week hurricane,
Yeah.
and with those, in time too, I can kind of confirm what you were saying. The one who was the most tumultuous, it came to light later that she's been raped and she's had a lot of really nightmarish stuff happen. So,
Yeah.
I hope I have the strength to be honest in my next thing I get into. And I know I will because I'm learning that the other way is even harder. It's actually, once you get that, it's not really that, it makes it a lot easier once you understand how hard the other way is.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I appreciate having you on here. And I don't have any questions about my inexistent relationship right now.
Well, I'm impressed and I am proud of you. And it does go to show, like, I'm glad that you brought that up because every woman is going to have a different set of thoughts and feelings about it. Some women are totally cool with it. Some gentlemen are totally cool with it. Like, they're like, yeah, of course we watch porn. Like, doesn't everybody? And like, don't you watch it together? And like, isn't this great piece of your sexual relationship? Every woman is going to have a different set of thoughts and feelings. It brings up different stuff. And one of the things that this just reminded me of is the shame that comes up for you guys with what you're watching. The flip side of that for the female is humiliation. So shame and humiliation and I think I talked about this on the podcast with Frank, it's like it's the flip side of the same coin. So shame is when you take your actions and you make them mean something about you. I'm a terrible person. Humiliation is when you take somebody else's actions and make them mean something about you. So I must not be good enough is the 100% across the board. Every single lady I've ever coached or worked with or connected with, that's their thought. That's what they make it mean. And that was my main response. When my husband told me about his pornography addiction, I had two main responses. One was the conscious response, which was like my fight or flight. I'm very geared toward fight. And I was like, oh, we got this. I was like, all right, let's sign you up. Let's do all the things. Do you need a therapist? Do you need a coach? Like, I didn't say coach because I didn't know that existed back then. So I was like, what do you need? Let's make it happen. You need to go do all the things. And he didn't want to do anything. So I was like, well, that's dumb. And I didn't know of anything that existed for ladies at the time. So I just didn't do anything. Right. But then the second part of me, the part that was subconscious, was the part that said, what's wrong with me? There must be something wrong with me. I must not be pretty enough, sexy enough. There must be something that I can change in order to change what's happening so that I don't have to feel this way anymore. And that's when I went into like, okay, well, I just need to like lose weight and do my hair and make sure I'm always on and never say no and buy more lingerie and like try and just make sure the house is always settled because I don't want him to be stressed because I know when he's stressed, then it's worse. And it was trying to control his behavior and in a very nice way. All from a desire of not feeling like it had anything to do with me. But a lot of times what's coming up for the ladies is their own insecurity, is their own negative self-belief. That's all running below the surface. They probably aren't even consciously aware that this is what's going on, but that's the flip side, is the humiliation of you guys are doing something and they make it mean something about themselves, if that makes sense. But if you guys have any other questions, I just want to look at my notes real quick and make sure I have.
I can even wait till the end too if you had more to share.
No, go for it.
I just, I mean, yeah, like this conversation is making me think about my previous relationship, and basically at one point in our relationship we sat down and had a conversation, and it was interesting because we noticed like, well, I don't know, I feel like she kind of more so brought up this idea of like building more trust. And even though I really trusted her and I felt like she really trusted me already, but it's interesting, like she really had some things that she wanted to share with me about sexual history and some stuff that happened to her, which I didn't know about. And she was just like pretty adamant about it. And at first I was like, because I kind of thought I knew what she was going to bring up, sort of. I was like, oh, it kind of sounds like this. And so I was hesitant because I just didn't know if this was something that maybe I needed to like get advice about and like maybe pull a friend in and like be like, how do I talk to her about this? But then it just kind of happened one day when we were hanging out, and I almost just like I felt an obligation basically after she shared what she shared, which was actually a bit shocking to me. Um, I decided to share with her about my struggle with pornography, and it was just very it felt kind of forced, but I also tried to be honest and I tried to be like, hey, like this is something I'm still kind of in the midst of figuring out. And that I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that I've been perfect at, getting this out of my life. And she didn't really have much to say about it. Like she seemed very understanding and everything, but I think even for myself, like learning some things about her that I didn't know, and then telling her something about myself that was very vulnerable, but then not having like any kind of follow-up to that, it just
Mhm.
like I kind of always had this like weird uneasy feeling about that. And then 5, 6 months later, we actually just ended up breaking up, which was a shock to me after 2.5 years of dating her. Um, but yeah, I guess maybe my question would be like that was like well into the relationship. So like with this kind of topic and like just wanting to like bring honesty into the relationship, like what like when is a good time to do that? And also like I don't know. Well, that's I guess my situation was kind of unique in the sense that she brought up something with me first, but um do you think it's just smart to like really like nip it in the bud and just be like, hey, like either this is something I'm still struggling with, or like this is something I am having some success overcoming, but it's part of who I am and my history. Like how do you go about that, especially as someone who now is just kind of like not in a relationship, and maybe one day I will be again, you know?
Okay, first of all, I want to clarify something that you just said. You were like, this is just kind of like who I am. And I know that you didn't mean it that way, but this is not who you are. What you struggle with is not your identity. And you are not the worst mistakes that you've ever made. So stop thinking about yourself like that. You don't have to introduce yourself that way. It's not like, hey, I'm Brett and I struggle with pornography. No. You're Brett and you're a human being and you're a soul. And yeah, we've all made mistakes. It's not how we introduce ourselves, and it's not who we are.
Yeah.
So work on how you're thinking about yourself, because that's going to change how you're able to bring it up. I would assume that that's probably why it's so difficult to bring it up, or why you didn't want to bring it up for so long, is because it feels like a very big part of you and it feels very heavy. And when you make it part of your identity, then it is heavy, because then you're not just sharing something that's like, hey, I like binge eat on the weekends. Like you're like, no, this is like who I am and I struggle with this, and it's like this big thing and it's part of, maybe it might always be here. I don't know, right? And then it's big and it's heavy and it's harder to bring up. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, it does.
There is no like right time. If we just Googled like, when's the right time to tell your partner you're addicted to porn? It doesn't exist. Okay. It's going to be different for every single person. What I would question is, why haven't you? If you're like, oh yeah, I should, or I feel like I want to, or I want to be honest, but that's what I would take a look at. To me, that's just like a little red flag of something that's coming up for you. And maybe it's like, I want to tell her, but it's only the second date and I'm not all that into her. Totally. And I like that reason. Totally fair. If you are on the second date, third date, been dating for 6 months, I don't know how serious you get, how quickly, but like, okay. And then you say, you know what? I feel like I kind of want to tell her, or I kind of don't. You just need to examine why and make a decision and just back yourself up and make sure you like your reasons. So again, if you're like, you know what, I don't totally trust her with this 100%. I don't trust that she's not going to go post this on social media. And you're like, okay, well, that's a fair reason. I like that reason, so I'm not going to tell her. Or if it's just like, you know what, I really want to tell her, but I'm afraid of how she might respond. Okay, do I like that reason for not telling her? Do I like the reason of, I'm afraid how she might respond? I don't want her to get mad. I don't want to hurt her feelings. I'm afraid that if I do and she gets upset, then she might dump me. If I'm okay with that reason, then I won't tell her. If I don't want that to be my reason for not talking to her about it, maybe I just tell her anyway. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
I know that was not like a real definitive answer of
No,
like,
that's okay.
do it 3 months and 2 days later. But hopefully that's a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Something that Ben brought up earlier that I did want to hit, especially for you gentlemen that aren't in a relationship right now, is I do not recommend that your spouse lady be your accountability partner. Do not. Your woman is never going to be, most women, 99% of women are not in an emotionally healthy enough space to be your accountability partner. Now, that doesn't mean, like, I know I started off like, look, be totally honest and talk to her. I'm not, these are not conflicting things. Be honest, be upfront, include her in how you're doing, whatever works for you. Ryan, like, I know you and your girl are like really connected and you're open about it. And I think that's amazing. Okay, but what I'm not saying is like, oh, every time I have like a trigger, I'm like, oh, okay, hey, guess what? I had a trigger. I don't actually know how accountability people work. I just know that when you are one for your husband or your person, your husband, your man, it's never good because again, it's her trigger. So it's going to bring up all of her stuff. And if she doesn't know how to handle all of her stuff, that is just the hurricane waiting to happen. Does that make sense? Do we see the difference?
Yeah, we tried that with Covenant Eyes for a little bit at first, and she was like, I think, checking it all the time at
Yes.
first, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then
like
she got to the point where
lady-
she didn't check anymore because she figured out, oh, he knows how to turn it off. So
Yes. 100%. It can be something that like the women almost get addicted to the addiction and they become
Right.
like obsessive. And again, they do it because they want it to feel better. They're like, okay, well, if I just know that he's not looking at it, then I'll feel better. Or if I just know what it is that he's watching, then I'll feel better. And they just want this to obsessively try and find something outside of themselves that's going to make them feel better internally. And you guys know that doesn't work. That's what she's trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, she
Jolene,
actually
on
at one
this-
point told me, I'm sorry. I was just going to say she at one point said, I shouldn't be your accountability partner. And first I was like, no, you need to be my accountability partner. And then I kind of realized that she was right. So
Yeah, Jolene, staying on this topic right here. So once again, kind of speaking to some of the guys that are going to watch this, obviously later on down the road. Some of the guys that come in here, it's because there's been an ultimatum in the relationship, right? I'm sure you've spoken with women where it's kind of like they, present the husband with an ultimatum: you fix this, or I'm out. I've literally had men that have been shown lease papers to apartments. For that guy, the woman may almost push it so much that I need to be in control of all of this. Difficult question, but tips to maybe kind of navigate that conversation to kind of, alleviate some of the stress, alleviate some of the pressure that she's feeling so that she knows she doesn't need to be hovering over him while he's going through this, even though she was the one that said, you have to go do this.
Sure. Well, I think number one is to understand that the reason that she's doing that is because of how all the stuff that's coming up for her. So the best thing that you can do for your ladies is encourage them and support them to get help for themselves. Again, I think Ryan, you're doing that amazingly well. You're like, hey, here is this. It's an offer. If you ever want to talk to somebody, I would love to pay for it. I actually know my coach has some resources and colleagues, and if you ever want to, there you go. So just notice that, if she does that ultimatum, it's because she's reached her emotional capacity. She's like, okay, I've handled this for so long and I've done the best that I can. I don't know what else to do. In her brain, she thinks, okay, we were fine until he had this problem. And once he's had this problem, or I found out about it, or he told me about it, or whatever it is, I found out about this problem. And then my life became a train wreck. So her solution is, if this problem goes away, my life will get better. She doesn't understand that what's happening is just her own internal stuff coming up. So she's trying to solve it externally, right? And so her mind thinks, hey, if he has to get better, or my life will stay like this. Okay. Now, if he's already in your program and he's coming to you and be like, hey, I'm joining this program because my wife gave me this ultimatum. If one thing that I would say is possible is he could go to her and say, hey, my coach as part of my program is my accountability person. And he actually encouraged me, and this is not a lie because I know you do this, okay? He actually encourages me not to use you because he knows it's so hard for you. So I want to be upfront and honest, and I will tell you if I've relapsed or whatever. Like a lot of couples have like their own framework of how, like how, when they tell or how they tell each other or whatever. And maybe they can agree to that, you know, like I'll tell you how I'm doing, but my accountability partner is going to be my coach. That's part of the program. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely. No, spot on. And that is actually, what we encourage in the conversations that we have. Outside of reaching out and hiring, I know you have some great free resource. I don't know if you have any more things you're going to kind of share here. We can go as long as you need to here tonight, but free resources that are out there. I think you have a book, obviously, your
I do.
podcast.
Yeah.
So we can kind
Yeah.
of-
Let's dive into all the stuff. I have a podcast. It's called The Porn Addict's Wife, and there's over 200 episodes on there. You guys can go listen to them if you want. My husband has come on several. If you guys wanted to hear more of our story, you can go just search podcast episodes where it's called Conversations with Rob. That's my husband, and he's come on. We've talked about sex. We've talked about him being attracted to other women, and we've talked about all kinds of stuff. You guys can go listen to all of that. That's all on, Spotify, YouTube, iTunes, all that. I do have a YouTube channel. I have an Instagram, which is at Jolene Winn Coaching. I have a book that's called The Not Enough Wife that you can get on Amazon. And if you go to my website, jolenewinn.com, I do have like a 5-minute video that kind of explains to women how it's possible for them to heal, even if their husband is still struggling with this. And I also have like a free course on how to talk to your spouse about his pornography problem. I go over like the most common mistakes that women make when they're trying to communicate. That might be helpful for you guys. You guys can go watch it if you want, if that's helpful at all. Anyway, there's tons of free resources, and you guys can always email me if you guys need anything. My email is coach@jolenewinn.com. So if you guys ever have any questions, if you're like, oh my gosh, my wife said this, what's she doing? Email me. I know you guys have Frank. Frank can always reach out to me. But yeah, always here to be helpful.
Incredible. Thank you so much. Any final bits? Did we get through everything that you?
Yeah, I'm done. If anybody has any like questions, again, I'm an open book. I talk about everything. If you guys want, I'd be happy to answer. Like if you guys have something that you struggle with your lady, and you want me to give you advice or an answer or something, totally up for it. If you guys want to know how we navigated certain things, again, I'm very open.
Yeah, I have a question. You had said in the beginning, this is kind of going back to your story. I might have asked you this on the first podcast. Sometimes I don't remember everything. You said that you hadn't had any signs that it would have been a problem, but then when he shared it, it was years until he really got free, and he was bouncing back, recovering. Were you seeing things in him that maybe you weren't recognizing in the beginning as you knew he was trying to work through some of these things? And if so, what were some of those signs that you saw in him that were like,
Great question.
Struggling?
No. There wasn't anything that I was like, oh yeah. What happened instead was, now that I became aware, I started seeing red flags, even if they weren't. And this was as simple as anytime he was on his phone. Big red flag. And it would make me, oh my gosh, what's he looking at? Right? Or I started second guessing his motives anytime he initiated sex. I would just second guess, and I'm like, is he just doing this because he watched something today? Did he get triggered today? And now he wants to have sex because he's trying not to watch porn? Or does he want to do this thing sexually because he saw it? Or like it just started my own hamster wheel of my own insecurities and self-doubt and distrust and all of that. So even though his behavior didn't change, and in fact, it actually got better. So like when he was struggling with addiction, like it was almost daily. And I had no idea. And by the time he told me, he felt like he wanted to get a handle on it before he told me. And so he felt like he hadn't relapsed in months by the time that he told me. And so it was actually way less than it had been. And yet, so for him, he thought of it as like more of the end of his journey. And for me, it was day one.
Yeah.
And so that was a big mental reversal that he didn't understand for a really long time. He's like, I don't understand why this is so hard for you. He's like, I'm doing light years better than I was before.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just the start.
Well, it just shows the power of our thoughts and, you know, how our
Yeah.
RAS, our reticular activating system will work. Like, you know, as I shared with Ben, like your world, your reality is going to reveal to you things to reconfirm the
Yes.
beliefs that you hold. So if, because of the lack of communication that I'm sure you guys were having, because he's like, I don't want to talk about this, I'm going to do it on my own.
Yes.
You're thinking like, what the hell is he doing? He's probably going
Yes.
deeper down the rabbit hole. It's the first time. What's this, that. So boom, phone, boom, reconfirming it. Boom, sex,
Mhm.
boom, reconfirming it. So just once again, showing the power of our subconscious mind. It will show us everything that we believe to be true.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. Guys, we're at the top of the hour. Appreciate all of you guys. For those of you that didn't catch this live, you missed a banger here. You missed an opportunity to ask some amazing questions. Those of you that did ask questions, thank you so much. This was incredibly powerful, Jolene. I mean, every time we get a chance to connect, it's just, I think magic happens. So thank you again, guys. Any final thoughts? Please thank you. Please thanks Jolene for
Sure.
her time. But yeah, guys, as we close it out here, any final words?
I would just like to thank Jolene. I think you're doing great work. I think you're amazing. And I think your hair is amazing too.
Thank you.
It's super cool.
I do too.
love
I
it.
love my hair.
It's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's helpful to know it's helpful to get a little insight on the perspective from the other side of this. So yeah, thanks for sharing and
Absolutely.
doing what you do.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. I actually listened to your podcast. Were you on there like a few months, I guess maybe like 6 months ago on Frank's podcast? Was
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just a couple months ago.
Yeah.
I remember listening to that and I was just like, man, that hit me in a different way when I listened to that podcast. So thank you very much.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Incredible, guys. Well, guys, have an amazing evening here tonight. Have a great rest of the week. We'll get this shared out to you guys. Jolene, I'll send this to you. I don't know if there's any value of having this talk, but I will shoot it your way as well. And I look forward to connecting with you again. And
Absolutely. Thank you guys for letting me come. And thanks for talking to me. This
Yeah.
was so fun.
Awesome.